Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, Jeff Waldorf here with you on this Monday evening. Welcome to the show. I have not been on for quite some time, so there's a lot of stuff to catch up on. But I'm here. I'm feeling marginally better, much better than I did actually than before. I'm about to... okay. I nearly had to sneeze right there, but crisis averted. Everything's okay. We are not sneezing. So we're good. We're good for the moment. Okay, never mind. That's a cough, not a sneeze, to be fair. All right. So, like I said, we got a lot of good stories for you guys today. We've got Safe Space Trump. We have policy from the Republicans on paid leave. You're not going to be surprised that it's not that great. I have the details on that. Then we've got Fox News erroneously referring to Latin American countries as Mexican. Is it an oversight or is it on purpose? That is the question. So I'm going to talk about that today. Then we have more policy stuff. Donald Trump on food stamps. Not him literally on food stamps, but the Trump proposal on food stamps, what it's going to do, how it's going to affect people, and why it's not good policy. Then we're going to talk about a C-SPAN caller that can't wait to bring back white old men into Congress. And then we've got another thing where the Republican Party is in trouble. Oh boy. So I don't know if I can really give anything else away as far as that, but the Republican Party is on basically the course for disaster and will not survive. So that's fun. Okay. Anyway, so a lot of stuff to get to, a lot of fun stuff. There's also a lot of stuff that I missed. Joe Biden getting all creepy, creepy Uncle Joe. That is a disturbing story. So there's that. And so, again, a lot of stuff. Progressives, the DCCC going after progressives. AOC saying, okay, instead of giving to the DCCC, which I don't understand why you would in the first place if you're a progressive, instead of giving to them, give it to the candidates directly in $27 increments. So there's that. A lot of stuff, like I said. All right. First, before I get into the show, I want to thank everybody for giving me well wishes on Thursday. Thursday was a tough day. It was my sister's birthday. A lot of you guys reached out, on Twitter and everything, and or on Patreon, and I really appreciate that. You guys reaching out and giving me well wishes and stuff. It was a tough day on Thursday, but got to see my sister's headstone. That was in first time. It was absolutely beautiful, and it was just it was a tough day, but you guys helped out a lot, so I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And of course, the next day, I get sick. So that's unfortunate. But hey, I'm feeling a bit better, so let's do this. All right. Moving on. Let's go to Trump. All right. So the president loves his safe spaces. This is according to a report from the New York Times. Although, if you've been paying attention to President Trump, you would not be surprised. Nonetheless, the New York Times took a look at how the president was isolating himself, not only inside an ideological bubble, as they mentioned, but in many cases he's been physically isolating himself as well. In fact, the newspaper had noted that Trump eats almost every meal in the White House or at properties he owns. Most likely at properties he owns, since then he can pocket the money. Then they noted about his presidential travel. They said His travel's been limited largely to red state campaign rallies with adoring crowds, brief appearances surveying natural disasters, official travel overseas, and a handful of forays to factories. Now, it's campaign season, so that's why it's a little bit weird. Like, wait a minute here. It is campaign season. Now, he should be campaigning for re-election. I mean, it's already basically started. So he should be out there maybe pitching to independents or disaffected Democrats. Something. But apparently, according to the New York Times analysis, he's basically keeping to a very small subsection of his base. Or I should say a very small subsection of Republicans that happen to be his base. Now, that's around 45% of voters, or likely voters. And so now you think, wait a minute, Donald Trump's only got roughly 45%, at least according to his favorability ratings. And you look at that, that is not enough to win an election. Well, maybe. And the reason I say maybe is, of course, it largely also depends on voters who haven't registered to vote, voters who are unlikely voters, new voters, and also a lot about who the Democrats put up as opposition. Now, if the Democrats put up somebody like Beto O'Rourke or Kamala Harris, sorry guys, I don't think they're going to have enough energy to win. And the reason that I say that is, look, when you run on platitudes and Trump is bad, well then you're not going to go very far. And we've seen that with Beto O'Rourke, basically running on platitudes, standing on counters and stuff and saying ridiculous things. It's like, oh, we're going to get through this through love and understanding. And no. I don't want that. I don't want love and understanding. I don't want to reach out to Republicans. I want to utterly crush them. So, not interested. Now, Kamala Harris, you might think, well, wait a minute. Kamala Harris is a decently fine choice. I mean, she's got progressive policy. She is what we call a Johnny-come-lately. And so, on that, if you're thinking, no, Kamala Harris is great, don't forget she's got a few red flags in her record as a prosecutor, as a cop. I mean, there's a reason that people have this thing where they say Kamala Harris is a cop, because that's kind of what she is, and that she has come to these new policy positions rather lately. So that would be a little bit of a problem, at least when it comes to consistency. And look, not only that, but in the Democratic primary, she's actually polling fairly low, whereas you have Sanders and Biden actually rounding out the top two. So if you run somebody like Bernie Sanders, if you can remember some of the polls during 2016 and some of the more recent polls now show Bernie Sanders having a commanding lead over Donald Trump. So you want to beat Trump, you go with a progressive. If you want to possibly lose to Donald Trump, which I know is crazy when you think about it, all the stuff that we've been through in the last couple of years, but it is still a possibility now that Trump is an incumbent and he has a so far decent economy with low unemployment behind him. So I'm just saying, try to put up a good Democrat that can beat Donald Trump instead of somebody who basically runs on platitudes. Because we're not interested in that. Voters are interested, especially Democratic voters, progressive voters. They're not interested in working together with Mitch McConnell. They're interested in crushing Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump. So keep that in mind, Democrats. Now, anyway. So, is this a good strategy for Trump? No, not necessarily. I mean, look, the Times explains that in many ways, Trump lives in an echo chamber of his own making, an approach to presidency that will be strenuously tested as Mr. Trump begins his campaign for re-election. So if you just exist in your echo chamber, in your bubble, that's not good, because you're not reaching out to new people, you're not reaching out to new voters, you're not getting new people interested. All you're doing is pandering to an increasingly small base. So that's not a good thing. Now, they also noted that virtually none of his travel as president has been to areas where he could expand his political base. Instead, he seems to mostly seek a controlled home court advantage. Now, let's compare and contrast that to Bernie Sanders, who went to, South Carolina, I believe? Also, AOC doing the same thing, talking to people who are disaffected, possibly disaffected Trump voters, right? Or people who supported Trump who thought that maybe they would, I don't know, get some sort of change in the system, because there are still those voters that tried Donald Trump because of something different. Like, I don't know, what am I going to lose? The status quo is not working out for me very well. But if I go with somebody that says he's going to shake up the system, well, then I'm going to go with someone that's going to shake up the system. Now, who's promising that on the Democratic side? Bernie frickin' Sanders. Now, again, this is somebody who, when asked, like, well, hey, wait a minute, Medicare for All would get rid of health insurance companies. Are you okay with that? Do you want to take a middling approach? I mean, are you going to get rid of the health insurance companies? Is that what you're really going for? When asked that, Bernie Sanders says, you goddamn right I am. Yeah, of course I'm going to get rid of health insurance companies because they're terrible. But you have other Democrats, of course, that are like, oh no, I would maybe do a Medicare buy-in and eventually phase out private insurance over a longer period of time. Let's do some incrementalism. Bernie Sanders says, no, I'm going to shake it up. I'm interested in going, in getting rid of for-profit health insurance, because at the end of the day, we're not going to need it when we have Medicare for All. Everyone's going to get covered. You don't need private insurance. It'll cost you less, and it'll give you more because it's a better policy. So, now, anyway, there's more. This is Republican strategist Matthew Dowd talking about Trump's so-called strategy, right? He says the president seems to be operating on how do I make my smaller supporters more intensified as opposed to how I get more supporters. Now, I don't agree with Matthew Dowd. He's obviously a Republican. We don't agree on policy. But when it comes to analysis, that's not incorrect. Again, he points it out saying, yeah, well, Trump is basically focusing on his most fervent supporters. Not a smart strategy. And again, if you think that he has actually thought about strategy, nope. Donald Trump has no strategy. He's an entertainer at heart. Dowd also said this, quote, he's using the power of the presidency instead of trying to overcome division. He is trying to harden the division. Well, again, I think it's fairly obvious. That's really kind of pointing out what he's already been doing. Not a shocker. Look, again, he's going to pander, since he is an entertainer at heart, to the people that already like him. That's what he knows. That's just what he knows. And of course, as far as the division goes, you've seen him. It's always this us versus them mentality. He's saying, we got to go after the Democrats. We got to go after the press. We got to go after, because the Democrats are not interested in working with us, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yes, he is setting up and exploiting this divide, which is what he's actually really good at. Now, there's more. This is Timothy Naftali, right? Who's a presidential historian and the former director of the Richard Nixon Presidential Library and Museum. He said this, quote, I think the president more often than not takes a sectarian approach to leadership, pitting one group against another. His schedule seems to confirm that. And to which I say, yup, of course. Look, Trump's actions go against the trend of presidents trying to get outside their bubble, right? Not interested. The one thing that we had that frustrated me, so much about President Obama, for example, and Hillary Clinton as well, the Democrats, is their insistence to reaching out to Republicans. Now, here's the thing. In a normal, regular world, that wouldn't be so bad. But as our politics are so much shifted to the right that we are completely askew compared to the rest of the world, reaching out to the Republicans right now means reaching out to a group that thinks that Democrats are basically Satan. I'm not kidding, right? There are people that think, oh no, Democrats are pure evil. I've seen the term demon rats. You go through and you read some of the comments from conservatives when it comes to the Democratic Party. That's the stuff that you see. You see some of the most horrific vitriolic stuff. Baby killers, baby murderers, and just all this horrible stuff. Like tyrannical socialists come to take your stuff. There are people that think Beto O'Rourke is a freaking socialist. Come on, man. Those are the people you're trying to reach out to. So I always, right now, I have a huge problem with people like, Obama and them trying to say, oh, no, we got to reach out to Republicans. No, you don't. You can't reach out to these crazy people since we have that Overton window shift. Now, when you actually get the Overton window back to what the true center actually is, where the majority of the country is, which is actually where AOC and Bernie Sanders are. And the reason I say that is because they are the center because most of the country agrees with them on policy. Over 70% of Americans want Medicare for all. Over 80% agree with the Green New Deal. I mean, it's stuff like that where there's the majority of voters, and yet you have Republicans out here, way out in right field, saying, oh no, we don't agree that the earth is warming. We don't agree with the majority of scientists, and we don't agree even with the majority of voters who say, yes, the earth is warming, yes, it is man-made, and yes, we actually have to do something about it. So that's where the Republicans are. And the centrist Democrats are just like, I don't know, man. We think we have slightly better ideas with them, but they're also actually really good. You should probably work with them. Here we go. Look, none of this should be a surprise to anybody, right? I know Matthew Dowd is out there saying, oh, can you believe it? Trump's isolating himself. He's not reaching out to the Democrats. In reality, that's what Republicans have been doing for a long time. They do not reach out to the other side. Again, most of the time, yes, there are Republican politicians, Trump included, who would say, oh no, we're the ones actually that are trying to protect Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. But then you look at everything that they do, they try to cut Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. They try to undermine all this stuff. So basically what they do in an attempt to reach out to other voters is basically lie about things. Trump's great at lying. But unfortunately for them, we can actually look up the truth. We can actually look up, we have this thing called the internet. We can literally fact check politicians in real time. So that kind of lies don't work anymore. So, but as far as reaching out on anything else, no, they're not reaching out to Democrats. So it's actually really hilarious, as I mentioned before, when Democratic operatives in the establishment says, oh, you got to reach out to Republican voters. Oh, but Jeff, don't you want more voters? Nearly half of all Republicans want Medicare for all. They want to take on corruption. They do believe in climate change. Yeah, but when the establishment says we need to court Republicans, they don't mean by doing populism. They mean by going more right-wing. They mean taking more fossil fuel money. They mean, taking more corporate donations and doing tax cuts for the rich. Whereas populism works, which makes me wonder if Trump will go back to using populism for the election and doubling down on his base. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. I don't personally believe that he will, which I think would be a huge mistake. I mean, the attack on the ACA, which polls at 50%, is an example of what not to do. But because he has no replacement plan. And he has criticized single-payer healthcare. He called Bernie Sanders' plan, for example, Medicare for all, 70%, as I mentioned, a curse on the United States. Yeah. So not having a plan and lying about something that 70% of Americans approve of, that may fly for his base, which is basically says that anything that the government even touches, like the ACA, for example, is full-blown communism. That'll go well with those people, but not with independents who could lean to the Democrats. So I think Trump would be playing this stupid game here if he goes in that direction. And I think he would do that because he has no idea what he's doing. He's not a smart person. He's a dumb person. In the first election, let's call it what it is, a fluke. He had the benefit of running against the worst candidate the Democrats could have ran. I hope the Democrats are a bit smarter on this one and actually end up running a real progressive. If not, Trump could win again, and we can't afford 4 more years of this. Let's be honest. Even if he plays to the safe space. Okay. All right. Moving on. Let's go to the Republican policy. This should show you the big difference between Republicans and Democrats. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. So Republicans have introduced their plan to provide paid parental leave. Now, that was something that Ivanka Trump and many other people in the Republican Party were saying, hey, you know what? The United States is behind the rest of the world when it comes to paid leave, so we should actually have a paid leave program. Now, the U.S., as I said, is the only modern country that doesn't have mandatory required paid leave. Some companies have begun offering it on their own, and that's fine and that's great, but when it comes to the millions of people that don't have that option, they should be able to. They are left behind. So now, here's the thing. The Republican Party considers themselves to be pro-family, right? So a lot of stuff that they talk about is not necessarily pro-family, so it is interesting to see them actually put forward policy. So now, let's take a look at that policy, and we'll see if it's good. Now, Marco Rubio, Mitt Romney got together and introduced a piece of legislation in the Senate to do something about our paid leave, to actually offer paid leave for new parents. Now, that's in the Senate. Ann Wagner and Dan Crenshaw offered a companion bill in the House that would offer up to about 3 months of paid parental leave. Oh, look at that. That's actually around 12 weeks, right? So now you compare it to the rest of the world, not quite as generous. New Zealand, for example, they have about 22 weeks of paid leave, which was just recently increased from 18 weeks, right? So, and that's because their new prime minister is a woman. Now, who, by the way, she's an awesome prime minister. Now, Bulgaria provides 46 full paid weeks. 46. That's amazing. Bulgaria. Who would have thought? Now, compare that to America, which currently has none. That's super embarrassing. But 12 weeks, it's a start. Bit low, but it's better than nothing. Now, upon introducing the bill, Marco Rubio said that, quote, our proposal would enact paid family leave in America without increasing taxes and without placing new mandates on small businesses. So, not increasing taxes and not putting anything on small business. So, 12 weeks paid leave, that's good, but it's going to cost you. Under the legislation, new parents would have the option to get early Social Security benefits for up to 3 months to finance paid parental leave. A fact sheet from Rubio and Romney said most parents below the median household income would be able to receive a benefit that would replace about 2/3 of their wages. So 2/3 of their wages, but the cost is you got to use your retirement. So you increase their Social Security retirement age by several months, or get a reduction in their monthly Social Security benefits for the first 5 years after they retire. So that's a bit of a problem. So hey, if you want to spend time with your kids once they're born, just leverage your retirement. Look how responsible we are. We're going to give you the option, we're going to give you the choice to either screw you now or screw you later. Well, no, that's not a good choice. That's a terrible choice. It's the Hobson's choice. Again, because you don't know what's going to happen when you retire. You don't know if an injury or an illness is going to, require you to retire early, and therefore, but you can't. You have to work an extra 3 months, and if you can't, well, it's a sad day for you, man. Doesn't matter. You said you took that early leave, that 3 months, or 3 months with your first kid, another 3 months for your second. That can add up. That's not a good thing. So now the Republican plan, to show you kind of the difference, was actually introduced by Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Now they had their paid family leave plan. They actually reintroduced it last month, which would also allow people to take medical leave and family leave for about 12 weeks. Now the difference is that it's paid for not by leveraging your Social Security, but by a small increase in the payroll tax. Now, when Bernie Sanders introduced this plan, he said the tax increase would amount to about $1.61 a week. So that's actually less than a cup of coffee. I've bought coffee more expensive than that. So, look, that wouldn't be too bad. I would like there be a plan that doesn't increase payroll taxes on working people. But hey, look, that's just me. I think we should go after the rich. But apparently I am deemed an enemy of the rich. So, and apparently I must be jealous or something, as some of my right-wing opponents would say. But hey, you know what? I don't mind paying $1.61 to make sure that I have at least 12 weeks of paid leave to spend with my kid. Fair enough. So now the Republican plan, to recap, lets you delay 3 months of your retirement or take less Social Security payments for the first 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years. Dang. And so, that's the Republican plan. The Democratic plan, as I just mentioned, small payroll tax, and then you're fine. Okay. So now, here's the thing. More problems. You never know when your Social Security retirement will get pushed up by Republicans. That's another thing they've talked about a lot. Oh, we're going to increase the retirement age. We're going to have it go from 65 to 66. So you take this plan and you delay your Social Security benefits, and then they push it up a couple of years. Well, who knows when you're going to retire? And you know why? It's because they want you to die before you collect. And that's just my guess, that they want to keep pushing it up so that people, who are working in labor-intensive jobs, look, they often don't have as much of a life expectancy as people who are in the top 10%, at least. So you have a lower life expectancy, and they keep pushing up your retirement age. Odds are you're going to die before you retire. And if you borrow against your retirement, that delays it even longer and increases the chance that you end up not being able to collect as much Social Security, if any at all, if you survive. So that's the price here. That's the price. And so I think this is another way of kind of trying to rob you of your retirement. And this is just more of that. Anything that they can do to make sure that they don't pay out the Social Security that you earned. And I think to make you choose between your retirement and spending time with your kids, because let's be honest, a lot of people can't afford to stay home with their child without paid leave. I think it's a terrible choice. But that's what you get with Republican legislation. Okay. All right. One more story here before the break. All right. Have a little fun with Fox News. All right. So Fox and Friends is getting slammed after a misleading graphic went viral on the internet. Now, this started on Friday when President Trump announced that he will be cutting aid to the countries of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras over their lack of efforts in stopping the migrants from leaving their borders and coming up to America. Now, he also separately threatened to close the border with Mexico, which would be an unmitigated disaster economically for the United States. I mean, come on, man. Now, this whole thing with El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras led to this hilarious graphic. I want to show you this one. Here we go. Trump cuts aid to 3 Mexican countries. Mexican countries. Now, look, I don't know if Fox viewers know this, but El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras are not Mexican countries. They are all independent nations that are located south of Mexico in Central America. Mexico is not actually a part of Central America. Mexico is part of North America. I know that sounds weird because, what are you talking about? Mexico is south of us, but still part of North America. And again, these countries are Central America. So, little geography lesson, right? Now, another fun fact here, since that's what we're doing. Many of the migrants coming to the U.S. are doing so. Oh, first, they're coming and claiming asylum because of horrific conditions. Now, for that, you have gang violence, rampant poverty, political upheaval, governmental corruption. These are just some of the conditions that are forcing people from their homes. Now, think about if you're in that position, right? So think about it. If you're worried about the gang violence. Now, the right-wingers love to think about Chicago, right? So what if people in Chicago decide they want to migrate up to Canada, right? In order to get rid of or to get away from that gang violence. You'd be okay with that, wouldn't you? Maybe Canada wouldn't be. But right-wingers, you probably understand, right? Or maybe you wouldn't. But it's kind of like that. You have gang violence. You have people being murdered and recruited into gangs. I mean, if they don't actually join the gang, then they and their families get brutally murdered. You get political repression, massive corruption. It's not a good place to live at this moment. And a lot of it is actually our fault because of our war on drugs that has failed. And of course, we have meddled in the affairs of some of those countries down there as well. So, look, it's not a good situation for migrants. And so, yes, they are coming through Mexico to America. Now, the United States, in recent years, has said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give aid to these countries. We're going to give them, a couple $1 billion, help them out, try to stabilize their countries a little bit. And so make it so that migrants don't want to come here, right? Now, Trump says, I'm going to take away that aid. Well, wait. So if you take away that aid, wouldn't that lead to potentially more people migrating to the United States to get away from that? Trump might want to think about that for a second here. I mean, it would make sense. And while he's thinking about that, while he's kind of mulling it over, I'm going to read a few of these awesome responses to this ridiculous graphic. Kimberly Phillips said, I woke up this morning thinking there was only one Mexican country. Thanks, Fox News, for the education. Stephanie Rule said, can't help but feel a little disappointed. It was great to spend spring break with my family, but we only got to see one of the 3 Mexican nations. Hashtag better luck next time. Casey's Notion says, quick, someone asked Fox News which continent Mexico is on, which is great. Dr. Keisha B says, North Mexico, South Mexico, and Mesopotamia. Oh, I like that. And Max Kennerly points out an injustice here. Really unfair how Mexico gets to have 3+ teams at the World Cup. The North Mexico, South Mexico, and the Mesopotamia team. Of course. And Paolo Ramos says, quote, that is how they see us at Fox News. So I love that last point. Because I think most of the narrative around this is how stupid the people at Fox are for putting up that graphic. I actually disagree. And this is what's interesting. I actually think that this is on purpose. This is targeted. I think it was intentional. Fox News has shown that it is a propaganda outlet. And so now later on you can point out, wait, Jeff, that doesn't make any sense because Fox News apologized for making that mistake. But did they? Just because you apologize for something doesn't mean you didn't do it on purpose. That it was an accident. Now you might be wondering, but why would they do that? Why? Well, it's because they know their audience. They do. We know that Fox News viewers are less informed than viewers of any other cable news channel. People who don't watch Fox News at all are actually better informed than Fox News viewers. And why is that? Because Fox News has an agenda, right? They know their audience, and so when they label these countries as Mexican nations, they know that that's going to click in the brains of some of their viewers. Oh, Mexico. We're supposed to hate Mexico. We're supposed to hate Mexicans. But when you say like El Salvador and Honduras and Guatemala, they don't know where these countries are. Where's that? I can't find that on a map, says the average Fox News viewer. And you know what? That's actually okay because you are not a news person, right? You're a regular Joe, regular stiff working at a factory in Pennsylvania. If you don't know where Guatemala is, I don't care. That's not a big deal. But odds are you do know where Mexico is. And Mexico, again, is something that Trump and the Republican Party have conditioned you to hate. Mexico. Oh, they're stealing our jobs, man. Trump himself, at the beginning of his presidency, his campaign, way back in 2015. People from Mexico. Mexico's not sending us their best. They're rapists. They're criminals, and some, I assume, are good people. Then you have people like Steve King, who said for every valedictorian, talking about the Dreamers, which some are from Mexico, South America, Central America. For every valedictorian, there's people who are, weigh, I don't know, like 150 pounds or whatever, that have calves the size of cantaloupes from running drugs, carrying 50 pounds of marijuana across the southern border. I know I butchered that, but that's essentially what he said. They want you to hate Mexico. So when they say, oh, Mexican nations, we're going to cut off aid to the Mexican nations, there's a point in that. They think of Latinos and Mexicans as the same thing. Despite, of course, it not being the same, despite the fact that you have, illegal immigration from Mexico itself, the country of Mexico, at a low point, doesn't matter to them because they don't do nuance. They just don't. It doesn't exist on the far right. To them, Mexico bad, immigration bad, migrants bad, Trump good, wall good, make America great. And the fact that Fox News had apologized means nothing. Because at the end of the day, for the audience, message received. Okay. I'm going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We got more stories for you guys, so stick around. Like and share the stream if you haven't already, and we'll be right back around the nation. Welcome back to the show. Run the Nation right here. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Got a lot of super chats and a lot of stuff to read, as well as patrons. So let me open up the super chats here, which I did not have open, which is ridiculous. Okay. So we have Elwell saying, Republican plan for the poor and destitute. Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? Excellent. Excellent point on that. The Jinxana is a new member. And I Fart Magic, also a new member. So apparently they're doing that monthly. But thank you for signing up to support independent progressive media. There's different ways that you can support us through the super chat, through becoming a member, through the YouTube, or becoming a member on Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation. And then Elwell also says, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, to see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of the Republicans. Good quotes. You're digging deep in the classical stuff, and I'm digging it. So, that's fantastic. All right. Let's see. As far as patrons are concerned, I want to thank, this is a hard name to say, O3MTA30, or 30. Thank you. Carl, Disco Phage, Angela, and Winkle the Bernie Bro. So, by the way, Winkle the Bernie Bro, the guy's killing it on the memes. So, I don't know if you've seen the meme with Beto O'Rourke standing on top of the podium. That was Winkle, right? And then the internet went crazy with it, and it was awesome. So, viral meme. So, you want to go back to who started that? Winkle. So, props to you, brother. And thank you for your support. Thank you to all of you who support us on Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation. All right. Let's move on. We're going to skip the story about food stamps. I don't have enough time on that. We'll do that tomorrow. Again, apologies for being late today. Let's go to the C-SPAN. You're going to love that story. All right. On Monday, a C-SPAN caller argued that Congress and the government was better off when there were just old white men in charge. Now, unsurprisingly, this is a Republican caller. Shocking. I know, right? Now, during a conversation about diversity in Congress on C-SPAN's Washington Journal program, a Republican caller named Phil from Connecticut phoned in and said this. Let's take a look.
Look at their education. More than 70% of the freshman class went to graduate school. 1/3 of the new members have law degrees, and 15 have MBAs. 7 freshmen earned at least 2 graduate degrees. Phil in Fairfield, Connecticut, Republican. Hi, Phil. Good morning to you. Go ahead.
Good morning. Oh, God, this freshman class, they are the stupidest things imaginable. Loud, vulgar, no concept of reality, no concept of how the economy works. You're talking about, who cares about their education? I think Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin taught us that the big schools obviously don't mean very much anymore in terms of the quality who gets into those schools. Nancy Pelosi, as the previous caller said before you cut him off, she can't control these characters. She has as much luck controlling the freshmen as she has keeping her dentures. She doesn't know what the hell she's doing. And in terms of diversity, I'm sorry, but if this is the fruits of diversity, bring back the old white men. At least they knew how to get things done.
Tell us how you really feel, Phil. I mean, seriously. That is not shocking. Hey, at least we know how they feel about women in Congress, and especially the new Democratic freshman class. Which, by the way, the wave that brought these women into Congress is one of the biggest electoral victories in record. That's a gigantic wave, right? And it brought, again, some of the most progressive people into Congress, people who are now essentially superstars among the Democratic Party on social media. But old Phil, he's like, I don't know nothing. I wonder if that has to do with the repeated attempts to disparage AOC, because AOC is actually fighting for regular working people and not the elites that apparently Phil seems to want to bootlick for. Just saying. His message to them is basically shut up, know your role, and continue serving the rich and corporations just like the rest of Congress. I mean, at least we got stuff done. If we just bring back the old white men. Yeah. I mean, at least they knew how to get stuff done, right? No, did they, though? I mean, I seem to recall that under Obama, we had a record obstruction. Of course, they're going to blame Obama for that, right? Where it was Mitch McConnell that basically said, I am proud of blocking every single thing that President Obama had tried to do. I mean, again, the only things that they could really agree on was to name post offices and, of course, give more away to rich people and corporations. But I guess bootlickers like Phil see that as a good thing, whereas the rest of the country sees otherwise and loves our new Congress people, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar. They are the wave of the future. Sorry, Phil, but you're going to get washed away. And that'll be a good thing for the country. Okay. Speaking of getting washed away, we've got a great poll here out here for you. You're going to love this. All right. Let me just get it right here. So back a couple of years ago, you had certain conservative writers spreading the idea that Generation Z was going to be incredibly conservative. In fact, there were some writers out there saying that they would be the most conservative generation since the baby boomers. Now, good example of that. Back in 2017, Ashley Stahl wrote this from Forbes magazine. She said, quote, according to research, which, by the way, she didn't actually cite, Gen Z is more individualistic, more conservative, socially and fiscally, and they're already making waves of impact on our political system. Gen Z, they explain, those born in 1995 or later, is possibly the most conservative generation since World War II. Now, that is a bold prediction. However, they have absolutely no evidence to back up. Not only that, but 2 years later, let's see if she is correct in that prediction. And for that, we're actually going to use something that she didn't, and that's actual polling data. Now, this is according to an analysis by the New York Times. It turns out that young Americans are running away from the Republican Party at record pace, especially, unsurprisingly, young Americans of color who now make up nearly half the electorate among Generation Z. Now, this is causing mass panic within the Republican movement, as GOP pollster Kristen Soltis tells the Times, quote, Republicans are in trouble. And she said, it would not surprise me if the problem is worse, not better, with Gen Z, given the moment we're in. Now, what does she mean by that? She means that Generation Z, along with millennials, are increasingly progressive compared to older generations. Now, the Times cites research from political scientists showing that voters establish their political identity during their formative years and rarely switch. And note that younger voters who have grown up during the presidencies of George W. Bush and Donald Trump could mean are basically trying to avoid the GOP because of how they acted when they were growing up. So now, more information on that. Election data suggests the youngest voters are now supporting Democrats, and surveys of teenagers not yet old enough to vote reveal them to be anxious about the current state of the country and more likely to embrace liberal and progressive views. Now, for example, I have some numbers. A full 59% of people 18 to 24 identify with the Democratic Party, compared with 33% that actually say that they're Republicans. Now, that's according to an upshot analysis of Pew Research Center data over the last year. Now, the thing is, you might say, okay, well, look, 33% of them are Republicans. However, there's not so good data for Republicans that shows that these people who are, yes, younger and identifying as Republicans are also more liberal than current-day Republicans. Now, this is according to another Pew survey. They found that these young people hold more liberal views than older Republicans on a wide range of issues, including race relations, climate change, and the involvement of government in people's lives. So, let me give you some numbers here from Pew from that survey. Now, let's talk about the government, right? So now Republicans are like, small government, keep the government out of our lives, lower taxes, less regulations. Let's have the government not do things. Let's hand it over to private corporations. Private companies can do a lot better than that goddamn government. Well, over 70% of Gen Z respondents said the government should do more to solve problems. That also includes Republicans, Gen Z Republicans. Now, let's compare that to the so-called silent generation that right now is basically the main pillar of support for Donald Trump. Now, they overwhelmingly vote Republican, and they say overwhelmingly that we should trust private corporations to solve problems by 60%. 60% of the silent generation say big corporations are awesome and that they should do so much more than the government. Only 39% says the government should actually solve problems. Again, it's the complete opposite when you look at millennials and Generation Z. 62% of Gen Zers also talked about racial and ethnic diversity. Now, what did they say? Now, as I said, 62% of them said it's a good thing for society. Now, the silent majority, so-called silent majority, say, no, we don't like diversity. We don't think diversity is a good thing by a larger margin. Only 42% of the silent generation says diversity is good for society. That is the lowest amount polled out of any generation. So they're not interested in diversity. Now, and of course you wonder why the silent generation is driving away young people of color, and why young people of color are not only more liberal, but they're also more progressive and aligned with people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, by the way, is absolutely crushing with young people, with millennials, younger millennials, and Generation Z. Now, these are issues, of course, where Gen Z is even more progressive than millennials, who, again, are already massively progressive. Now, Gen Z Republicans, for example, are also more likely to believe in climate change and support solutions. Even though, as I said before, the Republicans are more liberal on many different issues. And so, that turned out to be a pretty poor prediction by Forbes, by Ashley Stahl. Now, look, this also means is that the current Republican Party in its current incarnation is done for. It's doomed, gone. So they cannot sustain this. Once they lose the rest of, once the silent generation, starts to die out, and that's it. The Republican Party is done. There's not going to be anyone left. They're going to have to moderate as a party. So they're going to have to go back to being somewhat sensible, which I think would be a fantastic thing for the country. And if they don't, they're done. So this last election, the last gasp of the uber conservative white male. And this next election, I think, is going to be where young people, especially young people of color, actually take back the country. Okay. That's it. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Thank you for the super chats. Also, I want to give a shout out to people who donate through our PayPal. our Patreon and our Venmo. So yes, there is I do have a Venmo, and a lot of you do donate through the Venmo to help the show, and I appreciate that. I also want to give a shout out to people who are supporting the campaign. It is our I cannot think of the GoFundMe campaign to get a camera. So I had a slight brain fart there. So must be the cough medicine. But I do want to give a shout out to Marianne Kane and Richard Wembley, who both donated to the GoFundMe campaign. We're nearly there. We're at $1,336. So we're almost there. We're trying to raise $1,500 for a camera. And then the next couple of months, we'll figure out what camera we want, and we'll get that. And I can't wait to show you guys. So it's going to be a lot of fun. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow. TYT is next.